If your memory is getting worse, I'm gonna let you know right now, it's not your age. Today we're gonna talk about what happens to your brain when your blood sugar spikes for more than 10 to 20 years. And the reason why this video is so important is not necessarily just for you, but for your loved ones, because sooner or later you're gonna know someone that's going to develop this, and I'm gonna give you the information that you need to turn things around. Hopefully, because there is a limitation of matter, a point of no return if it's too far advanced. But what you need to know about dementia and memory loss and cognitive loss is these symptoms occur long after the problem is started. And so this is the part where medicine focuses on. We're going to go earlier in showing what happens at the earlier stages. In the first stage, you have the energy drop in the brain. Your memory's still good. You don't have very many symptoms, if any, other than maybe some fatigue. And then you go into stage 2. This is where you start developing certain protein residue in your brain that don't get cleared out. And another thing that happens is a certain part of the brain that's responsible for memory starts shrinking. It's called the hippocampus. And it's an energy hog. Out of all the parts of the brain, this is the part that has the most dense mitochondria, which is the energy factory. So it requires a lot of energy to work. But at this point, your memory is still fine. It's when we get into stage 3 where you're starting to notice certain things, especially with remembering names. Your ability to learn goes down. And this can occur when you're in your 30s or even your 40s. Now, the problem between stage 3 and 4 is you start losing more of your ability to notice your own cognitive decline. So in many cases at stage 4, your family notices your memory issues more than you do, and this is usually when you're diagnosed. And the problem with this is the traditional tests that doctors do, they're not going to pick it up because they're not looking for it, because their medicine is mainly focused on symptoms, and if you don't have any, they're not going to test it. However, if you wanted to know what test to do, it would be a PET scan. Okay, that would have picked it up in the earlier stages. Now, what's a PET scan? Maybe you've heard of a PET scan in relationship to cancer because it's the same scan. In cancer, they use a PET scan to identify areas of your body that are in hyper mode where you have a lot of glucose uptake, okay, because cancer loves glucose. The problem with this scan is it's very expensive and the doctors aren't going to do it unless there's significant reason to do it. And if there's no symptoms, they're probably not going to do it. In Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, it's just the opposite. You have a hypo-metabolism of glucose. And that gives a big clue on really what Alzheimer's is, because they call it type 3 diabetes. So it's an energy problem, because when you have high levels of glucose running through your bloodstream, your body then compensates and it starts to shut down your ability to uptake that glucose. And the term for that is called insulin resistance. But you get insulin resistance in the brain. And so there's a lot of glucose flowing through the body, but it's unavailable to the neuron. So you want to ask yourself 3 simple questions, okay? Number 1, do you need to eat every 2 or 3 hours to avoid getting irritable or having brain fog? That is a really good indicator of this blood sugar issue, okay? Even if you don't have diabetes, because even diabetes takes a long time to show up. Number 2, do you wake up between 2 or 3 a.m. in the middle of the night for no reason? That is not a stress or a cortisol problem. That is a blood sugar problem. Number 3, after a high carbohydrate meal, do you feel mentally sluggish or do you need a nap? If you answered yes to any of these 3, you could be somewhere in these stages right here. In other words, I'm increasing your awareness so you can do something about it now. When you have high levels of glucose flowing through your bloodstream and high levels of insulin, there's something that happens to vitamin B1. There will be a 16 to 24 times loss of B1 through your urine. In other words, the more carbohydrates that you consume, the more B1 you are going to be deficient in. Now, what is the significance of a loss of B1? Remember we talked about this energy factory being a problem, and then there's the backup source of fuel called glycolysis, where the body really only gets a small amount of fuel versus if you use the whole mitochondria, you'd get a much larger unit of energy. In diabetes, also in cancer, and in Alzheimer's, it's not that this mitochondria is actually damaged. Just the door is damaged. The entry to this unit. If you don't have B1, this door cannot be fixed. And you will generate a lot of lactic acid in the body. And this is what they found with Alzheimer's. There's a lot of lactic acid built up in the brain, which actually decreases oxygen and causes additional problems. So it's the excessive carbohydrates that are depleting the B1, which is destroying the door to allow you to have energy. Picture it like an engine. You have a carburetor mixing oxygen with fuel to allow this engine to work, but you need a spark plug. B1 is the spark plug. Now, what's really interesting, right now, there are researchers studying B1 in relationship to Alzheimer's. And they're testing the form of B1 called benfotiamine. I've talked about this many, many years ago, but now they're finally doing a study on it. So the National Institute on Aging right now is doing this massive phase 2 trial testing on benfotiamine across 50 different sites. I know with type 2 diabetes, they use benfotiamine for peripheral neuropathy. Even in a lot of other videos I've done, I've talked extensively on benfotiamine and what it does. It helps clean out the side effects, the toxicity of glucose byproducts. It allows the myelin sheath, the coating around the nerves, to be regenerated. In practice, I've used B1 for helping with nervous tension, anxiety. But the big reason why people are deficient in B1 is because they're consuming too many carbs, and too many carbs eat up the reserves of B1, leaving you high and dry. Even when we look at refined wheat or refined grains, like over 85% of that B1 is taken out. So when you're eating all this refined carbohydrate, sugar and starch, you are creating a huge deficit of B1, shutting the door to your energy factory. And now the body has to use the backup energy unit. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of energy around, so you're going to be tired. So regardless of where you are at, the absolute most important action that you can take is to start reducing the refined sugars and carbohydrates, because you could take all the benfotiamine or B1 you want, but if you don't change the diet, it's not going to work, because as soon as you take the carbohydrates, it's going to suck out the B1. So really, you need to combine a low-carb diet with this benfotiamine. How much benfotiamine would I recommend? I don't really know how much they're using in the study. I would just buy some benfotiamine. Whatever it says on the back of the label and the directions, I would times it times 4, and then I would spread it out, taking 4 times a day. Okay, that way it saturates the tissues. And while you're on a low-carb diet, this B1 can go in there and start doing its magic on helping restore the nervous system. If you wanted to take it to the next level and speed things up, you'd also want to add intermittent fasting, because fixing dementia or Alzheimer's requires you to fix your blood sugar problem. And if you wanted the perfect plan for that and the details, you need to watch this video right here. Check it out.